Yeah, so you've already heard, I'm Alex Buchan, I'm CTO at DTG, Digital TV Group. Thanks to Shure and Winform for inviting me here today. I'm going to be talking about the future of TV distribution, which is central to our work at the DTG at the moment. So just a very brief intro to DTG. You've heard a little bit there. So we're a research and technology organisation. We're a members organisation. Our members are from across the TV ecosystem, from broadcasters through to the TV manufacturers and all the distribution in between. And our general aim is to try and support innovation in TV and ensure it reaches its maximum potential. And underpinning all that, our mission is to ensure that TV is for everyone, so we don't leave any viewer behind. So all the innovation and everything that we bring along is for everyone, and everyone can enjoy it. And TV is supported for longer term delivery. So let's bit about the DTG. So what I'm talking about today, the future of TV. So TV, I think it's fair to say, is going through a seismic shift at the moment. UK TV has always punched well above its weight. TV brands in the UK are known throughout the world. Programs are known throughout the world. We explore content everywhere. So it's always punched above its weight. However, it's now in a process of being reshaped, and that is driven by several things, but fundamentally global streaming giants pumping billions into production in the UK. And this is changing audience expectations of the content they can receive and the types of viewing. And also it's putting pressure on traditional public service broadcasters who often operate under much stricter regulatory conditions. And then there's the creator economy. Platforms, TikTok, YouTube, etc., have ensured that people don't have necessarily the kind of barriers to entry anymore to reach global audiences. So you're getting a lot of smaller, agile content production partners who can reach massive audiences and can iterate very quickly depending on the feedback they get, can operate much quicker timescales than TV production companies. And then now bringing their audiences onto big screen. You're seeing commissions for the kind of YouTubers onto the kind of large global platforms now. So it's a continuing kind of fragmentation of what's available to watch. And then obviously technical presentations aren't complete without some mention of artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, that's the answer. What's the question? But yeah, it's potentially transformative, right? And it's across every area of TV at the moment, from content creation to networks through to people using it for their search recommendations, accessibility, usability, all of that kind of stuff. So obviously all of these things together are changing audience viewing habits. But is there some kind of massive shift towards all IP viewing? So this is the latest figures from Barb, which is the audience measurement company in the UK, and this was from August 2025, viewing on TV sets only. So you can see here how quick is the move to streaming. I mean, roughly speaking, the top two colours are broadcast and the bottom two colours are streaming and internet delivered content. You can see there's a general trend, obviously, towards less broadcast and more internet. But at the same time, there's still 50% of audiences relying on broadcast television in some form or another. So the general point here is that this would never reduce to zero if there's no kind of intervention. It would just carry on kind of changing over time, and it would stay this way for a long time. And an analogy is the radio industry. The radio industry pushed for a move to all digital listening about 10 years ago, and they said, when we get to 50% digital radio, we'll potentially look to switch off FM. But then obviously they got to 50%, and it still means 50% are listening to FM, and no government is then going to go, well, we're going to turn off that kind of technology, which 50% of people are listening to. So the result is you get broadcasters having to deal with multiple platforms, multiple networks, and today we've still got AM, FM, DAB, and internet. So without any intervention, this is going to just carry on like this for many years, I thought. So potentially, what could that intervention look like? Well, Ofcom outlined some approaches for universal TV delivery in 2024. And there were three options, and these were suggestions of where we could go. One, and this is related to digital terrestrial television, but the first one was double down on DTT, so invest in a more efficient digital terrestrial television service. Number two was reduce it to a nightlight, so we just have a core of services to protect perhaps vulnerable viewers who cannot move on to IP delivery. Number three was switch it off completely in the longer term and move towards all internet TV. And obviously, these options will have implications for technology that's using the UHF band, TV, PMSE, as well as adjacent services, IMT in particular, and DAB. So, and if we look at TV as an example, if we had a nightlight option, for, which was one of the options there, what would that actually look like? Would it be DTT, DSAT? What kind of services would be left on it? Who would pay for that infrastructure that's going to be reaching the end of life if you're going to carry on using it for 20 minutes? If we did a full DTT switch off, there'd be many enabling factors to get in place before you could do that. A lot of people still rely on DTT, as you just saw. So how do we support those viewers if they have to move to all IP in their home and in their networks? And then if you double down on DTT, that suggests obviously upgrading it. Who's going to pay for that? Generally, if you're delivering UHD content, for example, that's not necessarily going to bring in more revenue for broadcasters. So who's going to fund that? And there'd be some support required for users as well. And then throughout all of this, you've got the prominence and the reach of public service broadcasting to think about. And then for the PMC side, 476.94, Martin was just saying, we heard it's the vast majority of audio PMSE deployments are in that band, 60%, and 85% of product support is in that band as well. So any kind of suggestion of moving PMSE out of there would be extremely difficult. And the PMSE industry is growing as well. There's, I think, 30% increase in licensed PMSE spectrum in the last 3 years in the UK. And so any of these kind of nightlight options or switching off DTT options would potentially open the door for other allocations in the band, IMT, 5G, whatever, 6G, that kind of thing. And so these need to be considered very carefully. The discussions for these kind of things obviously are going to be at WRC 2031, but the agenda for that's going to be laid down in 2027. So there's an imperative requirement to start thinking about it now. So those are the Ofcom proposals. So what happened? Well, the UK government set up some industry working groups to try and decide how we move forward. There's 3 groups set up. One was the TV sector, with the broadcasters and platforms in there, chaired by Jill Hindert Enders Analysis. Infrastructure group, which is the manufacturers, the apps, the networks, CDNs, that's chaired by DTG, so my boss, Richard Lindsay Davis. And then there's the audiences, which is the kind of audiences and consumer groups, and that's chaired by Professor Cathy Johnson at the University of Leeds. And the membership of these groups is drawn from a range of TV and infrastructure stakeholders, audience advocacy groups, trade bodies, etc., experts. The idea of this is to try and improve the evidence base for the future of TV distribution and inform the UK government. So identifying issues, options for moving forward, try and act as a forum for some kind of discussion and ability to reach some kind of consensus and explore options. So these have been working over the last year and a half or so on various activities. And really the focus of the group is that it's audience led.
Hey Alex,
yes,
go back to the
sure, yeah.
Please. So this is really about the future of TV, correct?
Right, yeah.
Is there any discussion about PMSE at all, audio PMSE?
Yeah, sure. So certainly the idea, there's an awareness of tangential kind of industries like PMSE. I mentioned DAB as well, who rely on broadcast kind of towers and infrastructure, but it's not been spoken about specifically in these groups. The idea is that they discuss the future of TV distribution and then understand what the requirements are for that, and then there'll be a kind of longer term project to look at, okay, well, if we go down this route, what is the other kind of implications of this that we need to address over the longer term. But yeah, the idea is this is a long-term plan. It's definitely not something we can look at in the next year or two.
You know, I understand that, you know, the objective of this group. I can tell you, working with, you know, countries around the globe. Just taking the example of Nigeria, for example, NADA, you know, is covering that region for sure. We talked to them about PMSE, and they said, "Don't worry, we have a plan," and it was just about TV. So they just thought about TV transition, just like US did or UK did, you know, when 700 megahertz happened. And they didn't realize they have thousands of big churches in Nigeria using wireless mics.
Yeah.
And then we pause on the 600 megahertz auction after we talk to them. So there's always a danger of not having audio PMSC included, because people just say we have a plan and we're going to move forward, and all of these, users or mics are just forgotten. And we told them, all of a sudden you can no longer use a mic for your mass on Sunday. What are you going to do just because you have 5G base station just outside interfering with those mics that are inside? So that's just something I wanted to mention, is people just think, okay, we have it sorted out, and they just forget a major incumbent of the band, which is PMSC. So that's also just sharing some experiences we've had around the globe.
Yeah,
people just look at just TV alone.
Yeah, of course. I was actually chatting with Duncan before when we were having a cup of tea, and I was saying that PMSC seems a lot more this time that it's front and foremost of the conversations around spectrum, whereas before it was kind of like, oh, and what about PMSC? Whereas now you'll see even mobile outputs from GSMA, they reference, well, there needs to be a long-term plan for PMSC, because people recognise that they're an incumbent part of the band, and you can't, and like I mentioned, you can't just move them out of UHF. They're inherent in the band. So there's definitely an understanding that PMSC needs to be considered, and whatever gets kind of proposed here is not necessarily going to be, well, we're definitely going to do that. There needs to be a lot more work after that to work out how you implement it. So yeah, these working groups, they're very much looking at the audience-led thing. I think ultimately most people are going to transition onto IP delivered content over the coming decade. A minority of important viewers, it's not going to be a small minority, it'll be a significant minority, may not, but 99% of the UK population will have access to gigabit connections by 2032, if you look at the latest plans. But obviously some people may not choose to access them, some people may not be able to afford to access them, some people may not know how to use IP delivered TV, or just decide, well, I just want to stick with what I know. So there's a bunch of socio-economic kind of problems as well around that. Yeah, there's the focus is really that there's no viewer left behind, and there's a lot of challenges that they're looking at within these groups. Within the DTG, we created a document to try and inform the wider industry and help our members understand what's been looked at. So we've written this report here, and really it outlines the idea. It's a wider industry document to kind of help people understand and shape the transformative shift in TV at the moment. This is the living document. It's not got all the answers. The idea is it acts as a stimulus for discussion and debate, and it'll evolve as certain questions are answered and certain questions are identified. And so what do we look at in that document? And this is some of the stuff that's been looked at in the government working groups as well. So if you're thinking of, well, we could switch off DTT and move to IP, there's a lot of things you need to think about before you do that. Content delivery, IP delivery at scale and at low latency. This is particularly important for live content, live sport. There's always the example of what if you had the World Cup final, it was all on internet delivered TV. So it would be a poor experience probably, because you're competing with social media. There'd probably be problems delivering it because of the capacity on the network. The latency would be an issue. So how do you address those problems for delivery at scale on the internet? Service and content discovery, the electronic programming guide always comes up for discussion there. So if you had all IP delivered content, it's generally tiles of apps which you have to go and find. You can't just kind of scroll through content. A lot of people rely on pressing one and getting BBC One. You won't be able to do that if it's all IP delivered. So how can we move forward with a kind of similar system that people are used to, or do we need to? And how do people find and locate public service broadcasting services? Then there's obviously resilience and quality. Our broadband networks is reliable as broadcast for delivering content. Accessibility, usability. There's a lot of requirements on making sure all of those facilities are available. The broadcast networks operate under stricter licenses and requirements than perhaps a lot of internet channels. So it's maybe not as prevalent, some of these services, if you're looking at all kind of internet delivered only channels. And then recording, advertising. Recording comes up a lot in conversations as well. Obviously in broadcast, you can record a piece of content and watch that for how long you've got the recording hardware. In internet delivered services, you generally get pushed to a player of some kind. and not all content is available in that player, and not all content is available. It's only available for maybe a short window of time. So do we need to make something available in the future where everyone can record internet delivered TV as well? So what is the requirement there? What is the kind of legal aspect of it as well? So there's a lot of things to sort out. So the document we've written has some short, mid and long term outlines of where we're at with all of these challenges, with some clear actions for our working groups to try and address these and come up with some recommendations. Okay, so the other thing we're doing is, I mentioned some audiences may not be able to transition to IP delivered content as easily. To look into that to some extent, we've just done a usability project commissioned by Ofcom, delivered by ourselves and I2 Media Research, and this explored some of the usability barriers that people have that undermine confidence and independence. So as an example of some of the kind of things we got them to do is kind of older viewers. So first off, it was, well, can you find whatever news channel using channel numbers? So 100% of people could scroll up using, it might take them a while because they're going 1, 2, 3 or whatever, but 100% could find channels using channel numbers. And then you said, okay, well, use the channel grid, the programming guide, the EPG, and then we dropped down to about 55%. You could actually do that. And then we said, okay, we'll find it through either the home page or the players, the kind of BVOD apps, that kind of stuff, the iPlayers or whatever. And then it was only a quarter of people could find whatever they wanted using that method. But then we said, oh, did you know you can use voice to do this? And most of the participants didn't know. But when they started using the voice recognition, like found the button on the remote, then it went back up to 80% could find the service they wanted. So it shows that there's methods there that people can use, but that they're not aware of. So a lot of the capabilities are there, but people generally are not aware that they can use these things. They don't know about them. So there's a requirement there for us to educate industry and bring forward a bit of a kind of move to help people use these functions that are already there. So yeah, so that's freely downloadable on our website. All right, so what's happening next? The future of the TV distribution roadmap. Well, the government working groups are finishing next month, and then a decision is expected soon from UK government as to what we do next. And this will have to go through some kind of parliamentary process. So just kind of referring to the conversation earlier, because some proposal will come out of that, it doesn't mean that we're definitely going to do. It will kick off a period of work about, well, okay, how could we move forward with this particular idea? And the premise is not to talk about a change to TV now, but to define what we would need to get in place to do this, which is what I was just saying then. 2034 has been kind of proposed as a target date. This aligns with other milestones like licensed multiplex renewals for UK broadcasters, as well as obviously the World Radio Conference in 2031. But no decision has been made on this at the moment, and yeah, there's the final decision will come out soon. Like I said, the working groups will finish next month, and then that will pick up decisions. And evidently, this clearer decision on broadcast TV will mean a clearer framework for PMSC studies to be initiated. At the moment, there's a lot of kind of posturing and kind of people trying to stake a claim. You've got various competing views on things. This is a Broadcast Networks Europe vision of the UHF band up to 2040. You can see essentially the same, no change, keep it as broadcast, throw in some kind of 5G broadcast potentially, but it'd be PMSC and broadcast solutions essentially till 2040. So that's one vision. And then different vision is clear 600 megahertz reduced down to 3 DTT multiplexes, and yeah, reduce down the service offering. So this was part of the Polyargo report that came out recently from the UK Spectrum Policy Forum. And then right at the other end, you've got this statement from GSMA, which was a response to the RSPG consultation, and calling for a primary allocation of 470 to 694 for mobile at WRC 2031. So this is their position, which they'll be talking about at 2027 when they're planning the agendas for 2031. So you can see everyone's trying to stake a claim at the moment, and PMSC really needs to, as Martin was saying, put forward some clear evidence as to their requirements and the status of things at the moment. So, you know, there was some perhaps misconceptions around, well, 960 is going to solve any kind of spectrum shortages. WMAS will solve any spectrum shortages. 5G is going to sort it all out. And really, there needs to be evidence put forward about potentially the truth.
I'm glad you mentioned 5G. So what's your view on 5G broadcast or ATSC 3.0 in the US?
Yeah, 5G broadcast. Well, 5G broadcast has been kind of championed by a lot of European broadcasters. I think it's fair to say in the UK, it's not getting much interest. We did some trials on 5G broadcast in the UK for mobile network operators, but it was mainly looking at stadium use cases, broadcasting to fans, that kind of thing. But the broadcasters in the UK are not looking at it as a replacement for DTT. I think it's probably fair to say. In Europe, France, Germany, Italy, I think Latvia, Czech Republic, a lot of them are getting together and looking at, well, could we use 5G broadcast to reach new audiences with TV on the move in busy areas as well as in home. And so they're pushing that, and they've formed a consortium to try and move forward with that. But they're trying to drive the device ecosystem at the moment to support it. There's more mobiles coming on board which are available to support it, but obviously until you get the Apples and the Samsungs, you're never going to get that scale. So the idea is the broadcasters are trying to start slowly with some smaller mobile phone handset providers, and then demonstrate there's a need, and then that will bring others along as we go. So our bit of the DTG, we've got a PMSC working group. We provide an update on latest technologies and what's going on in that. So if you're not across everything day to day, you can come along to that group and find out what's going on with 5G or whatever the latest kind of technologies are to support PMSC. We input into spectrum discussions, various forums, Ofcom, WRC, DCMS, and we coordinate with other groups to provide that kind of coherent voice into these discussions. So yeah, if you're a member of Berg, you can come along to the DTG PMSC group. It's a very good kind of way of collating information and presenting a common voice for PMSC, and got good connections into UK organisations. So in summary, I know 2031 sounds like a long way off, but yeah, as I showed, there's decisions now being taking place now or in soon that are going to really impact thinking around that. Those discussions in 2031, and those discussions are going to be formed in 2027 WRC as well. So the upcoming DCMS decisions on the future of UK TV will give a clear strategy for delivering universal TV, and will provide a framework for PMSC audio spectrum studies. I say initiated, I know there's a lot of work going on, but it's a kind of clearer framework for us to gather evidence and work around what's going to happen. The RSPG, which Martin mentioned in the kind of recent report on the UHF band, they called for evidence-based planning. They want facts, they want evidence, they want not kind of the posturing and the kind of saber rattling. They want some clear inputs as to, well, what's being used, what's the requirement, what's the demand. So I think that's the approach we need to take going forward. So yeah, if you want to get involved in the DTG work, thanks to Berg and kind of sure very kind of active participants in that group. But yeah, come and speak to me afterwards. You can share a copy of the slides, and yeah, welcome any questions or catch up with me afterwards if you haven't got any right now. Any questions?
AI, is that possible?
Yes.
Over there first, please.
You've given me a memory from 2012, which was Mark Waddle, if you know Mark.
Yeah, Mark's the chair of our PMSC group. And
when the 700 megahertz was becoming, moving from a UHF, DTT to mobile, there was a lot of discussion about using 4G as was for TV distribution in particular, perhaps rural areas where high power, the large towers were getting that. I've completely forgotten about that until you mentioned this. Do you know if anything ever happened there? Did we ever look at that possibility of using 4G as was for
to deliver TV services? So there was, I think there's various pockets of trials. I think the BBC were working on some stuff. I think they looked at some things around radio in particular first, a similar kind of concept, I guess, broadcast. But yeah, there was never anything kind of done at scale or in any large measure. And
So when you mentioned 5G, you know, in response to the question,
yes,
would that be something similar then? Would that be, you know, people in the homes may have a little 5G box that just receives from the local base station and they watch TV like the old days? Is that?
yeah, but I mean, yeah, potentially. I mean, fixed wireless access is certainly becoming a kind of word of the day at the moment in many areas. But I think the kind of direction of travel in the UK is that it's expected that you'll be getting internet to your home, which is of a certain quality that you can then just use that to get your services within the house. In Europe and in DVB, they're definitely looking at merging 5G and broadcast networks to have some kind of network of networks which can deliver content, and you'll have some kind of gateway in your house, yeah, which is exactly what you're kind of talking about. So the standards in DVB are heading that way, but I think in the UK it's probably more an expectation that we'll rely on fixed broadband to deliver services to the home in the future.
Yeah, really quick one.
Yeah, sure.
So you had a slide that says it's looking like the DTV provision in the UK will move to mobile to be the primary user.
Oh no, that's what is that the GSMA comment I mentioned? That one.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that, yeah. So yeah, good point. You mentioned that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that's what GSMA said.
Fair view. That's
Yeah.
That's what the GSMA said.
Yeah, this is a comment from GSMA in their response to. So there's a link there to where this was said. So the RSPG had a consultation on the future of the UHF band, which was in August this year, and the GSMA provided a response to that. And what they said that was, well, we want a clear policy milestone, including a primary allocation in 47694 for mobile at WRC 2031. So really, it's just to say, well, people are staking their claims now.
It's interesting to know what then the DTG view would be if the GSMA statement was to come to fruition. What would the impact be on audio PMSE? That discussion taking place.
Yeah, of course. I mean, our position would be that you couldn't do that unless there was some alternative for PMSE. And as Martin said, that's not very easy to move out. We've done studies before for coexistence. We do a lot of studies on coexistence and things like that. And there's been a lot of work done in the past on, well, could you share mobile and PMSE? And it's not really feasible. So yeah, this statement obviously would not work unless there was something in place for PMSE.
And I read the GSMA response, and again, as I said earlier, it's not about kicking mobile. They're going to have an interest in the band, but you know, the temptation is to set it up as a DTT versus an IMT thing. And actually, PMSE, I think, from the response, got a single mention right at the bottom of the document, and effectively amounted to, well, PMSE should move out. As I said before, the next question is, well, you tell us where then, because there aren't alternatives available. And that's PMSE, if you like, is the inconvenient problem in the argument. You know, it's not set up as a, you know, these two Goliaths battling. You know, PMSE's requirement for spectrum will continue irrespective of what happens to the distribution mechanism.
But do you agree that the answer to your question is not a GSMA issue? GSMA does not have to find the spectrum for PMSE, right? No, I mean,
yeah, but
it would be not fair to say yes, they want to move in, but they have to answer where PMSE move out. It's not a GSMA issue.
yeah,
It's a regulator issue.
I agree, PJ, but you know, like Alex made that comment that even GSMA wants to find a solution or something along those lines. I can tell you, when you talk to GSMA one-on-one, their reply is just get out, and that's it. So that's fine. But as a regulator, Ofcom, NFR, these guys, even in US, a conversation cannot be just get out.
It's a regulator issue.
Yeah,
it's not a GSMA issue.
Yeah, but we should not be naive either thinking that GSMA necessarily want a solution for us. We're not naive. They cannot find a solution. Maybe should not. But sometimes, you know, even Alex said that correct. Like GSMA is being constructive and stuff. That's not the case. They just want us to get out. I mean, we need to work with regulators to find a solution.
They're setting out their stall, and one thing I would say is that you know, they will say, well, yeah, we need more low band. Yeah, the cost for us will be prohibitive if we don't have it. What they tend to mean is that there will be costs, but they don't expect to bear them. They expect other industries to bear the costs. So again, it's like one argument for them, another argument for the industry. So what the cost will be borne by other users already in the spectrum, namely PMSE, and they will the impact will be on event, your creative sector, the nighttime economy of the West End, Paris, you know, any big city across Europe that needs to put on big events. That's where it's going to be keenly felt. It's not a small cost either. There'll be places where you can't put on a big event anymore. Yeah, there are the spectrum requirement at a big PMSE event is substantial. It will use all available spectrum. And if you don't have it and you can't find a means to make it available when and where it's needed, you can watch other countries that aren't so stupid mop up your event sector. That's my personal view.
Yeah. I mean, the general point with this was that, there is a definite need for the PMSE to continue, PMSE industry to continue putting forward their position. Like you said, it's not the GSMA's role to allocate spectrum to PMSE. The PMSE industry needs to stand on its own feet and make its evidence. So the time is now to put some clear evidence of requirements. And it's difficult gathering evidence, but there's been a lot of work done in that area. But yeah, the requirement is now to put forward those cases into government and regulators to make sure they understand the facts when they're making these decisions.
If I may, I want to I don't want to confuse you, but using this regulatory wording. So first of all, WRC, World Radio Conference, does not mandate the use of the spectrum. It is a national decision.
Yeah.
So GSMA, you always hear, WRC has decided now we have to know. It's a national decision what the spectrum use will be. Then when I when I see mobile, when we talk about mobile, we think about smartphones. In the regulatory world, it's not true. PMC is a land mobile service. Mobile. So if you upgrade the band in the radio regulations to mobile, PMC is suddenly primary user. Like military mobile, like mobile IMT. The really critical item is then if a part of spectrum is regulatory wording identified for mobile IMT, and this has happened for UAE. They identified the use to one of the mobile users, mobile IMT, and then it's gone.
Yes.
So there are two sides of the world. One is the regulatory part, and the other one is what happens on national level.
Yeah.
And so it's very complex. I don't want to confuse you, but if I read that, it is just the first step. Does not mean that the ban.
But there is no doubt in GSMA. This is the mobile IMT, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They are not arguing. Or they are
Absolutely.
Not, yeah.
But they're trying to. So this is how they lobby. So they're saying to the administrations, no, we are not asking for mobile. What I read of that, they don't tell of Communique or other administration, you have to go for mobile IMT. They're saying just put mobile there. So you're very flexible to.
Do you think Ofcom understand it as mobile at large or mobile IMT?
Martin's done eight WRC, so Martin definitely understands.
We hope that they're smarter than that, right?
We definitely know the difference between a band that's mobile and a band that's identified for IMT. And it's right. The GSMA are arguing for mobile because it's an in for them to use the band for IMT technologies. Whether or not the WRC identifies it for IMT is a good question, but that's certainly what they would like. And I think for me the key, and we've seen this in the work in 6 gigahertz. And people are saying this isn't a regulator problem. It's not a regulator problem. It's an industry. It's the overall industry problem, which is how do you share? Sharing is difficult. People don't like sharing because it's hard work. PMSE's been sharing for years, and they've made it work, but you can't rest because things will continually change. Other parts of industry are less used to sharing. IMT industry is less used to sharing. When we've been pushing shared use between Wi-Fi and an IMT in 6 gigahertz, you've got, it's very hard. We're trying to encourage both industry parties to work together to reach some technical solutions that will enable more efficient sharing. It's incredibly difficult. You need that mindset shift for them to actually do something. And we've been pushing really, really hard. But it's not easy. But we will continue to, to push. Sharing is going to be needed almost everywhere. As I said yesterday, spectrum's always been shared, but the intensity with which it needs to be shared going forward, because there are more and more uses, it's just,
Taking the upper 6 gigahertz as an example, this is a failure from the regulator. We cannot just always blame the industry. Wi-Fi against mobile network operator, fine, they don't want to share. They have been clear from day one. At the end of the day, you split the band. This is a failure from the regulator. This is not a failure from the industry. I mean, the regulator has not been able to step up and to say, guys, this is not how we will play that game. The game is sharing. Find the solution. So, I mean, you don't look good on this battle, to be honest. So again, GSMA is promoting their view, and this is what they are paid for. If you take,
so is the broadcast industry. If you look at that, so everyone's trying to put their claims in at the moment. That's where we're at, really.
I think regulators, we cannot just ignore that regulators are really, it's very deceptive to me.
I just wanted to just maybe ask questions because you mentioned the role of the regulator, and I understand, like, again, it's GSMA's role to really push for their agenda, and the same thing for the PMS users. And Martin, you mentioned the sharing that, as regulators, you're considering sharing. IMT has always been against sharing and going with nationwide, but then within the UHF, as we see spectrum going to IMT, do you see, as a regulator, can you push for sharing within the UHF band, at least for known areas, to set like exclusion zones for PMSC? Do you see that happening?
Well, there's lots of things that might happen. I mean, it's not been decided that IMT will go in the band, for one thing, and for another, I think we will, if that were the decision, we will have to think really hard about how we accommodate PMSC and what are the options for doing that if IMT comes in that band and DTG is either cleared or shrunk down, and the gaps in the spectrum just sort of evaporate. We are not I don't think going to be in a position where we would clear PMSC from the band. We would need to find a way of making it work. I don't have the solution, but
that leads to the critical question of terms of access. So, what does that look like? What does sharing look like? What are the terms of access? Who's where in the hierarchy of that process? And the current dynamic is that mobile in the hierarchy is always up here and PMSC is always down here, and that's me from PMSC always playing the underdog, but because that's the nature of where we are. The only experience I've got of where that wasn't the case was that with the white space device program a number of years ago, the pressure for white space device to be filled up by all sorts of new toys that were coming in there and all the rest of it became very unattractive when the protection criteria required that Ofcom was prepared to support in protecting PMSC as an incumbent user suddenly meant that that spectrum was very unattractive for white space devices, and therefore there wasn't a great deal of uptake on it. We need a similar situation where actually the spectrum becomes less attractive to mobile because the terms of access are such that PMSC usage is recognised and in some way protected. I don't mean it's necessarily exclusively. I'm open to the sharing concept, But the dynamic on the basis of which way around it is if you put a ring fence around, say, the West End and say that's a PMSE area, it can't be for mobile use, then that has to be set out in order to make the mobile sector then go, okay, do we still want that spectrum as much because we can't access the following areas because we recognize PMSE has a role to play and it can't go somewhere else. But that's a really difficult dialogue and a really difficult language in terms of status and access. But it's one that the regulators have to really get up front with. If we believe what government and the positivity around the fact that Ofcom statements, government statements recognise PMSE's value better than they have done in the past, which is all positive, the action needs to now follow from that to say, let's put PMSE front and centre of that discussion rather than let's work out where mobile goes and what DTT looks like and whether it shifts and does this. Oh, and by the way, in 5 years' time, where's PMSE going to go? Because then we get the thin end of the wedge again, which is insufficient and disruption and the uncertainty that you referred to just now.
We are running over.
Just very quickly, so this discussion happened in New Zealand, and that's exactly what the regulator started to do. And guess what? You know, the guy from mentioned, you know, the name of a mobile operator there, correct? They showed up at that meeting. Guillaume is not here, but Guillaume was on that call. And the first time the New Zealand regulator was proposing, you know, so going through this plan, we're going to put, you know, in Auckland, whatever, you know, these exclusion zone for PMSE, IMT cannot go in there. Guess what? The guy from the mobile operator went up there, and then this thing was just frozen. So even if the regulator wanted to do the right thing, because there are some areas, just like the West End here, all of a sudden everything was just put aside just because of the lobby of the mobile operators, and it just stops.
I had a quick question for the
One more
podcasting,
question.
yeah,
There's a
position.
platform with my name on it, so feel free.
We already ate it.
I just wanted to understand a little bit more the position from the broadcasting industry perspective. I understand from your side that the end goal is to have TV accessible, but do you have a preferred technology? Because you mentioned DTT, then you said, well, in the future, if it's possible to use another technology, it seemed that you wouldn't mind that much. And for me, it was the link with the PMSE discussion where there's a proprietary technology, there are microphones and so on. And it seems that there's less of a solution to switch to another service there. Is this the reason why the two industries are not speaking with one voice sometimes on the same frequency bands? Is that the case? Or I just wanted to understand a little bit the differences in positioning
Between broadcast and PMSE. Well, I would say broadcasting is a heavy user of PMSE, but in terms of, again, to sound boring, in terms of radio services and allocations, they are distinct users. One's broadcasting as a primary allocation, as Gang said, PMSE is an application in the land mobile service. So they have existed harmoniously in the same band for decades and sometimes still to come. But that might change, and that's why. You know, so this is why I said earlier, I'm quite keen to see PMSE as a standalone, distinct requirement, separate to broadcast. Broadcast is the world of broadcast is changing. There's no denying it.
Martin, what does Alex think?
So yeah, certainly the view from the broadcasters in the UK would be that they would like to move to all IP delivery at some point. If you're talking about sustainability and cost savings, the biggest way they can do that is by having a single network which they have to manage. But obviously they understand it's going to be a very difficult process to do that. And there's a lot of considerations for them in terms of, you know, advertising and things like that, and funding and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to get sorted out. But yeah, the BBC publicly said, yeah, they want to move to all IP delivery.
So when it comes to the 600 megahertz band, for example, it might be a transition for broadcasting. For PMSE, it's much more of a direct impact, whereas you would need other frequency bands to do that. But for you, you would be looking at doing it with terrestrial connectivity, for example, switching services. It doesn't matter as long as the end user is connected to.
Yeah, the challenges we've got making sure the end user still can access the services, and that public service broadcasting is prominent, and all of these kind of things. So it's how can you move those assets of TV onto all IP? The spectrum, I guess, is less of a consideration in that sense, because obviously if they're moving to all
But that might be true in Europe, right? But when it comes to Africa, where
Yes.
terrestrial services are completely lacking sometimes in areas where DTT is much more pervasive and reliable, this is a complete different question, because then you have this discussion in Africa where they often think about national televisions in these bands and not necessarily about PMSC.
I was going to say, I mean, we mentioned the WRC regions. Region 1 covers a huge area, and the challenge is there's so many different options across that whole area that it's very difficult to make a single decision. Everyone's going to do this, and Wolfgang's saying, well, independent regulators can do what they think is best, but at the same time, with broadcast TV especially, there's coordination aspects, and you can't just switch up on thing as a knock-on effect with your neighbours. Even in the UK as an island, we have to consider Ireland and Belgium and France and Netherlands and things like that. So yeah, that's the challenge. It's trying to find something across the whole huge, third of the world almost that you can do as a kind of single decision is very difficult.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.